Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Meet the Agent. My name is Alan Perez. Work here as a communication manager with the media team. And today joining me is Emilio Rodriguez, an expert real estate agent with over 30 years of experience. Emilio joins us from the Inland Empire area, which he services. Thank you so much for joining us today. Emilio, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. And thank you so much for joining us. To give a little bit of background and really set the stage, could you share with us, Emilio, what your process was to become a real estate agent in the first place?
Well, I've been in the business for a little over 34 years to be exact. I had graduated from college and I got into professional sales doing pharmaceuticals. And when I bought my first house, I had a really bad experience, my wife and I, with the realtors that represented us as buyers. And my immediate response was to think that if realtors are representing people with their lifetime investment and spending thousands of dollars, and back in those days, it was a very, you could buy a house for $50,000. But at the same time, I thought that the representation had to be a very professional and a very integral part of the transaction. And my wife and I felt that we weren't represented the right way. So that's why I decided to get into the real estate business, because I thought that if I could do this and represent people the right way and be honest and ethical, I would do very well. And so that's what originally got me started into the real estate business. And like I said, I've been doing it for 34 years and I've done very well at it. And I still derive a lot of satisfaction from seeing each of my clients succeed in getting the property, making money, selling the house or the property, but in a very, very smooth way. I always say it's got to be a win-win for everybody. And even though I represent a buyer or a seller, I'm still very I feel indebted to the profession, and I treat everybody with respect. And I tell realtors on the other side, just because you represent the buyer or the seller or vice versa doesn't mean that we have to be adversarial towards one another. My goal is to close the transaction and do it as smooth as possible for everybody. And so at the end of the day, everybody says, you know what, it was a pleasant experience, whether it was from the realtor side or from the seller side or the buyer side or my side. So that's my approach to any real estate transaction.
Amazing. And, it definitely encapsulates because for a lot of different times when I am speaking with realtors, right, I always look to find what is that X factor, especially when you have such a lengthy amount of time in the industry, right? There is that defining kind of it factor. And I would say that is, from what I can interpret from what you just shared, yours, right? The fact that you have you feel that responsibility, not just to the client, but also, like you mentioned, to the profession. Now, I mean, expanding on that a little bit further, do you have what would you define specifically as your brand in real estate? What is it that you want to make sure comes across to your clients or comes across in the transaction?
Well, I would answer that in a number of ways or with a number of factors. One, I think you have to be a professional. You have to know what you're doing to be able to represent people the right way and exercise your knowledge, because that creates a comfort level for the client. At the same time, I think you have to be uh, you have to listen and you have to respect the clients as well as other realtors. Sometimes I'm kind of appalled because I have an education background. I have a bachelor's degree, uh, and I'm used to dealing with people who are educated. And sometimes I think that realtors have to really exercise not only ethics but also a certain level of professionalism. Because to be honest with you, it's easy to get a real estate license, in my opinion, but it's not easy to transact business in a professional and ethical way. And I just wish there was more of that among my profession, because sometimes you encounter people that don't have the same level of scrutiny and integrity that should be exercised. And it's interesting because we all have to take ethics courses every 2 years. But at the same time, sometimes you run across a realtor on the other side who you don't experience that level of ethics that should be exercised uh, at all times. So sometimes it's kind of interesting and challenging to say the least. But I always emphasize that. So my brand is to really not only exercise my knowledge and project that to my clients and help them, but at the same time exercise a level of integrity. If you always say the truth, you'll be respected. And if you don't know the answer, there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know that, but let me find out and I'll get back to you. There's no need to wing things, nor to be deceiving or to lie. And so that's what I mean by service with integrity. And I think that's always been my brand. I like to do the best for my clients, but also with the truth in a diplomatic way. But I don't tell people what they like to hear. I want to tell them what the reality is and the truth.
Definitely, and I mean, we definitely agree with you in terms of, especially when you mention and discuss the real estate industry, right? I think it's what makes it such a interesting and impactful space is the autonomy that the agent, the representatives, right, the licensed professionals have, and like with all things, right, if you're looking to find a professional, you should make sure that they have that dedication to your best interest, which is what I would definitely define, as you mentioned, selling with integrity and making sure that you're clear in communication, is ultimately what it is having that fixation, that drive for their best interest and making sure that things move forward in the long run. Um, and actually, on that same topic, right, one of the things that, as far as I'm aware, right, can be a little bit challenging for especially new real estate agents is being able to empathize, being able to understand, this prospect that I'm reaching out to and talking to. It's not that they want to be difficult or that they don't want to be honest with me. It's that they're figuring out and understanding their own process as well. Especially with the amount of time that you've been in the industry, how do you make sure that you emphasize that empathy aspect to make sure that you put yourself in your client's shoes, that you're not, overly salesy or trying to hold them to a timetable that they're not comfortable with?
Yeah, well, I think that goes to being sensitive, finding out what their needs are, and being respectful of that. Um, I always say, if you understand what the needs are, you're able to, and your goal is to satisfy that need, then you accomplish your ultimate objective, to be successful and to carry the transaction through. And at the same time, you need to educate, whether it's a buyer or a seller, because the needs are different and the postures are different. Sometimes the emotions are different. And I also think that you have to set the standards, or set a level of expectation, so they don't feel deceived, or they don't feel turned down, or they don't feel like they're not getting what they need to, or what they're set out to get. In this market, for instance, you need to set the expectation that there are not a lot of properties to show. It's a very limited market because of the scarcity of properties and availability of such. And also, you need to let them know that, be prepared, if you like a house, to offer, give it your best shot, because you have 10 other families competing to buy the same property. So again, that goes to the level of expectations, so there's no negative surprises, and being truthful. So setting the stage, and letting people know what to expect. Just like if you have a seller, you got to let them know that there are certain responsibilities that they have as a seller. They need to disclose any material facts about the property. They need to be honest, and so that level of expectations, you really have to control. Whether you have a buyer or a seller, you need to control them. And by that, I don't mean telling them what to do. I just mean setting the facts straight, so they know what to expect, and they know how to behave, or how they should behave in throughout the transaction.
Definitely. And I find that to be a hallmark of the really best cream of the crop agents. The ones that should and do rise to the top are the ones that want to share perspective, want to align expectations, make sure that all of that is taken care of at the very beginning instead of at as things get more serious with the transaction, instead of having to have those skeletons in the closet or unforeseen circumstances needing to be discussed later on in the process, can be a little bit more difficult. Although that does pose a question for me, Emilio, because it's something that, especially for agents that are starting out and they're not in the swing of things from a prospecting aspect, it can be difficult to find a balancing point to make sure that when you speak with someone that you're able to be forthcoming and give them the right perspective, at the same time to not overload them with information and make the process too big, right? Because that can also make people skittish. How do you find the middle point so that you're able to balance that well and not scare off the prospect while still sharing the important aspects?
Yeah, that's a very good point that you bring up, because my philosophy is I always try to give, where there is if it's a buyer, I give them a general overview in a kind of a succinct way, but at the same time, I let them know what to expect, what they need to do. I let them know you need to get pre-qualified, you need to get pre-approved, especially in this market. You need not to get in another debt unless you absolutely have to in an emergency situation. So I set the level of expectations, and then I give them an overview of what to expect. If it's a seller, I tell them this is what's going to take place. But at the same time, I tell them you're going to have questions, and I'm here for you to guide you every step of the way. I'm just giving you an overview now, and I don't want to overwhelm you with the details, but I'll be with you every step of the way, and I will explain every aspect of the transaction as we go along. But this general overview is what you can expect throughout the transaction. So that way they have, they sort of have a picture of what they're going to go through without the specific details. And then I handle the specific details as we get into them. So it's like if I have a seller, I tell them now when we go into escrow, their buyer is going to do a home inspection. They're going to do a request for repairs. There's a special form that gets used. And typically I let the sellers know the only thing you really have to do is any items of safety, any cosmetic things you don't have to worry about. But that's something that we deal with when we get there. So don't worry about that now. But that's just something that you can expect. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Don't get scared. We'll handle it. We'll negotiate, and I'll carry you through the process when the time comes. But I don't bore them or overwhelm them with the details, because we don't know what it's going to be like. Once we get it, then I say, okay, so this is what the inspection report pointed out. This is what we got to do. This is what we should do. Now, how do you want to handle it?
So one thing that you just mentioned is making yourself accessible, right? Making sure that, again, coming from like an empathy side, I would imagine, right? If you put yourself in the position of the prospect and you're thinking, I have a question that comes up, you'd want to be able to get that question out as soon as possible, right? And so that's what you're able to offer to them. Something that we do encounter is that can disrupt or make it a little difficult to establish a work-life balance where you're able to cut off and say, okay, from here on, I can have my personal time where I don't necessarily need to be on call. Have you ever struggled with that? What is the process that you have for making sure that you have the right kind of work-life balance you can be comfortable with?
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because I always put my clients first, and I tell them the only way I won't, the only time that I will not answer your calls is if I have no reception. Other than that, or if I'm with a client, I'll take the call. Say, can I call you back? I'm in a meeting now, but can I call you back? And if I'm going to be done in a half hour, is it okay if I call you back in a half hour? And then I always make sure that I call back. But I'm always available and accessible. My phone rings, I pick up, and that's anytime, whether it's Sunday or evening or first thing in the morning. I always like to make myself available. Sometimes I say that if a seller would know that their realtor is not available to other realtors, they probably will not be very happy with that agent. So, because I've had a situation where I've called a realtor, sometimes it takes me 2 days before I get a call back. And I don't think that's the way to properly represent either a buyer or a seller in that case.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with you. And it's something that we're aware of in the industry, right? Which again, it can be it's an interesting topic, right? But being too busy, right? Getting to the point where you're not able to return calls, you're not able, where things have to be a little bit more, the timelines are dilated, so to speak, right? When you know that the agent isn't able to manage their transaction side of things while at the same time talking to new prospects. How is it that you're able to avoid that issue of becoming too busy? And had you ever encountered that before in your business?
Well, I make it a point. For instance, I have a transaction coordinator, and she handles all my paperwork. And I tell my clients, so once we open escrow, you're gonna have all the paperwork from my transaction coordinator. I'm available to help you with the questions, and I'm not gonna leave you alone. But she's the one that handles that. But as far as all the contact and all the communication, it all goes through me. And I never want to let go of that because I don't want to break down in communication. I don't want somebody getting irritated because I told them something and now somebody else tells them something, or they can't get a hold of me. And I find that sometimes across the table where a realtor works with another person, and you're dealing with three different people, and nobody knows exactly, and there's no continuity of service. So I never want to interrupt that. So that I'm always the first line of communication at all times.
Amazing. And sure. Well, I think that it if I'm not mistaken, you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that it stems from the fact that, and it's something that we hear a lot in business and entrepreneurship, is that you should find the things that you excel at and continue to run at those things, unless it is something that you should end up delegating, right? If it's not a money making activity, as they call it, right? And in this circumstance, it makes sense that you want to be that clear first line of communication because maybe this is something that's a little bit too important to delegate or to transfer out to somebody else. Amazing. Now, switching gears here, something that I wanted to be able to discuss with you, especially with the amount of time that you've spent in the industry, and given the fact that you mentioned that you do like to befriend your clients, make a deep, lasting relationship with them. What does your follow-up look like? And what I mean by that is with your past clients, with people that you've already been able to transact with, how do you make sure that you are top of mind, that they don't forget about you, that they're able to reach out to you, and that you will navigate them through their next transactions as well?
Well, I keep in touch with them. I remember their birthdays, and I always make a personal phone call on a birthday. I don't send them a birthday card, or I just make a call and say, hey, I know today's your birthday. Happy birthday. So I have it on my calendar. So every time, every morning when I open up my iPhone, if I see your birthday there, I say, okay, I got to call Alan today. Today's his birthday. But also periodically I would call them and see how things are doing. I just closed a transaction, for instance, where some windows were supposed to be replaced because they were under warranty. It was an expensive home, and this just happened Monday. And so I called them Tuesday. I said, I'm just following up. I know the windows were supposed to be done yesterday. I just want to make sure that everything is okay. And they call me back and says, yeah, thanks for following up. Everything turned out great. It was completed. So little things like that. Just because the transaction is closed, I don't say, well, goodbye to that client. Let's move on to the next one, because I always say your referrals are the most important thing to me, and you're not going to refer me if you're not happy with me. So I tell people I'm going to do the best to make sure that you're satisfied, because when you know somebody that wants to buy or sell a property, I would like you to refer me, because that's my business. That's most of my business comes from referral. And so I let my clients know. So I'm going to do everything possibly to satisfy you, because I want you to be happy and I want you to refer me to your family and your friends.
Definitely. And it makes sense, right? That you strive to hit that standard, that this is a standard that I need to make sure I satisfy all questions, all reservations, all concerns that might be brought up, so that they know that that's how I navigate my business, and they know that they can trust other people to work with me. I think that it does, again, come from that aspect of knowing how to mentor someone through the process, knowing where their perspective is, what additional perspective they might need, and really being able to run forward from there. Now, we are running a little bit towards the end of our time here. We do have time for a couple more questions. I mean, again, seeing with the level of wisdom and the perspective that you have in the industry, what I mean, I know that we've already mentioned a couple, but what would you say are the biggest mistakes that new and struggling realtors are making when it comes to their business, whether it be prospecting or representation or whatever the case may be? What would you say the biggest mistakes that you encounter usually are?
I would think, and yeah, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer to your question, but I would say the biggest mistake, in my opinion, is the lack of follow up that I see in realtors, whether it's for their client or for other realtors. Because again, my I project to you, if I'm representing a seller or a buyer, I am projecting to the other side the representation, whether it's good or bad, not only for myself, but for my clients. So I think that has to be utmost. That's why I go back to the ethical point of view. I just wish that everyone was as ethical as they should be, because I think when you're representing people's, for a lot of people, their lifetime investments, I think we ought to do the best for that client and for the other people on the other side of the table. I always say, just because we represent our respective clients does not mean that we have to be adversarial towards one another. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I see in my career, and that I wish that every realtor was more in tune to their clients and to other realtors as well, because I think there's a level of respect and camaraderie that should be exercised at all times.
Definitely. I mean, especially when you have the imbalance, right, that exists in the real estate industry. If you have those greener, newer agents that are still finding their way, to be able to count on kind of the more seasoned and expert agent to do what they can to make sure that everything goes across smoothly for both sides, that's the ideal scenario. And that's how I mean, ideally, the real estate industry does grow to that length, which I mean, I would say it does, right? As we've seen and as we continue to see, the real estate agents that maybe are a little bit more transaction oriented or money motivated, they're not able to stick it out in the long term because it is about building relationships, about having a lasting impact. And actually, on that topic, something else that we find is very interesting and important for real estate agents to take advantage of is becoming a fixture within the community. How is it that you're able to gain recognition and put yourself out there? Because again, in my understanding, that's something that can boost a lot more word of mouth referrals if you are impactful in your community. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, and that's a little more of a personal approach. You see some realtors that do billboard advertisements, and it seems like they're in your face within specific area. I like more of the personal touch. So for instance, when I close a transaction, um, sometimes I take my clients out to dinner. Sometimes I give my clients a nice gift. I use, for instance, a Cutco knife. Right now, I bought 12 sets of. There's my camera again. I'm sorry. I bought 12 sets of a wine opener and a spreader, and it has my name engraved with my cell number. The spreader says "Spread the word." So little things like that. But I like things that are memorable, not necessarily in terms of overwhelming them with mail, but just doing something special for them. And I also like to tailor it to the specific person. If somebody's loves wine, I'm not going to give them a wine opener, uh, as I just described. So I do different things that are memorable and that are specific to the client. Again, it's tailoring, because one client is one client. Not everybody's the same way. Not everybody reacts in the same fashion. People respond to different things. And so, like if somebody's very analytical, they don't, they're very reserved, they're not going to want to go out to dinner with me, but they may appreciate something that I do for them. They may be more appreciative. I'm more analytical in my presentation and more factual. Somebody who's got a promoter personality, they're going to be wanting to be praised, or etc. So I tailored my approach to the specific needs of the person.
Definitely. And Yeah, I mean, it sounds again, it's not business oriented. It's very much just personality and personal oriented. It's how do you retain friendships? How do you make sure that you are able to communicate to somebody that they're important to you? And like you mentioned, giving personalized gifts, being able to know kind of foundationally what they care about, what they're interested in, and act on that. That's how you become somebody's friend, and that's ultimately how you're able to stay top of mind if you want to continue with that client base. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Emilio. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to speak with you. For our viewers and listeners, thank you for watching this episode of and listening to this episode of Meet the Agent. Don't hesitate to check out our YouTube page at youtube.com/SetSchedule to view more episodes just like this. And again, thank you so much for joining us, Emilio. Thanks again, and we will catch you on the next one.